Such a pretty song. Likras Shabbos, Likrat Shabbat from Shlomo Katz. How's everybody doing? That's Light of the Darkness. He'll do it both ways, right? So Shlomo Katz, definitely davens and sings it with a more Hasidish Ashkenaz Shabbos, Likras Shabbos. But he lives in Efrat and speaks with Israelis, so he might say Likrat Shabbat. But it's mostly Americans in his community over there in Efrat, so yeah, it could go either way. How's everybody doing? We got a great daf. We're lighting up the darkness. Who is with us? Yehud in South Carolina. Gordo in Scotland. It must be Friday. Welcome, Gordo. Paula in the Great Northwest. Tom in Hawaii. Can't stay for long. I bet you wish you could move to Hawaii. We loved it there when we visited a few years ago. Dennis in Maryland. Renee in Indiana. Paula will have to leave early too. May you only hear good news. Bella in Florida. Dorothy in Pittsburgh. Melissa in Great Neck. PK in Colorado. Over there on the YouTube side, Lindsay in Cincinnati. Lynn in North Texas. Aoife in Florida. Marjorie in Georgia. Welcome, everybody. I hope you had a wonderful Purim. We sure did. It was awesome. I had a bunch of l'chaims. I'm just not really one to get intoxicated on alcohol, so I didn't really overdo it. But I saw quite a few people who did. But it was all in good fun. And we just had a beautiful Purim Suda. Big thanks to everybody who tuned in for our annual reading of the book of Esther and who donated. All donations, and you could still donate to that either through our website or on that post on the Facebook page using the donate button. And all the donations that we collected yesterday and connected to Purim, even if it's today, are going to just flow through us to a number of individuals that we've interacted with personally who really need those funds. So it's that mitzvah of Purim to give gifts to the poor, gifts to the needy. So those funds that we collected will be distributing to the needy, and it will come in. It will be very much appreciated by those individuals. Obviously, whose privacy we will respect. All right, let's get into it. We are a page behind because we didn't have a show yesterday on Purim. But as I mentioned before Purim, we're not going to do the double daf today to catch up. And we'll just ride along a page behind the schedule until the next point when there's two, relatively short pages that it would make sense to double up in one day. These are challenging pages here in Tractate Yevamos, so I don't want to rush so much. And by the way, when we first started doing this show, this class, this daily class 2 years ago, we were just really doing highlights from the daf, some interesting concepts from that day's page. And when the page was too technical and long and difficult and somewhat dry and legalistic, we just did a little bit on the page, and then we did something like a Meet the Mensch episode where we did kind of the life story of one of the sages. And I was actually thinking back then that I would save a lot of those sages for this kind of a tractate, Yevamos. But it seems to me like the overall level of our class, of our regulars who are here every day, like we've all learned a lot together. And it's been quite a while now that we've really been doing the whole daf every day. And, I just like kind of hear back a little feedback from people. If we do the whole daf, right, then you can just listen to the daf and you've essentially read the daf, right? If we don't do the whole daf, then we can have a really, deep and interesting and entertaining class. But people who are doing daf yomi need to read the whole daf, so they didn't get the whole daf from our class. So I'm curious, would people prefer to keep going along like this, kind of a little bit higher level class? I do everything in English and try to introduce all concepts. But we've been running along doing the whole daf and keep it that way to do the whole page. Or more people thinking, no, it's fine, Sal, if you only cover some highlights. And if I want to do the whole page, I'll do that on my own in case we don't do it in class. Let me know where you guys stand on that. I've just been overall impressed from the feedback that we've gotten, the kinds of comments and questions that we get, that, where it might have been hard to follow one of these whole pages, both in terms of understanding and interest. 2 years ago, it's a higher level class now that we've all come to together. So Yasher Koach to all of you, and let me know how you feel about that. But for today, we'll do this whole daf, or, we're starting a little bit near the bottom of 9b. We're on page 10. Today's daf is page 10 in our class here in Tractate Yevamos. But as has been the case, and this is very typical in any daf yomi shir, we'll start a few paragraphs from the end on 9b, and we'll finish a few paragraphs from the end on 10b. And if we're going to keep to doing the whole daf every day, that's why it would make sense to do a double in about a week. I looked ahead, and in about a week, there's going to be sort of 2 short pages in a row when it would make sense to double up. And by the way, that's very typical in daf yomi shirim, right? Classes that teach daf yomi, that the class runs along a little bit behind. I mean, the class that I joined the first time that I went through daf yomi was sometimes running as much as a week or 2 weeks behind the schedule. There are classes out there that no matter what, they make sure to be on the schedule. But even, just running 1 page behind is really no big deal at all. So let me know how you're feeling about those thoughts. And we'll revisit that question at the end of class today. Okay, so we picked this up on near the bottom of 9b, and we're still discussing the first Mishna of chapter 1. The Mishna stated these 15 women, would have a prohibited relationship with the Yavam, the surviving brother-in-law, in a case of levirate marriage, yibum, and therefore they are disqualified from marrying the surviving brother, right? Even though their husband died childless, and his surviving brother has an obligation to marry his sister-in-law, the widow, and that their first child would sort of continue the line of the brother who died childless. But because these women have some other relationship with the surviving brother, they could be a daughter, a sister, via some, convoluted family arrangement, and we'll discuss more of that. So they're prohibited from marrying the brother, the surviving brother, and if the one who died had 2 wives, the co-wife is also exempt from yibum or the alternative mitzvah of chalitza. They don't do either yibum or chalitza because one of the wives is disqualified and she exempts the co-wife. And we've been looking at all these permutations of that. And now, lately, we're discussing this idea of, well, why was the Mishnah stated in this way of listing these 15 women? It could have listed 16 women because there's some other cases that aren't included. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said that a sage who asked him why one of these cases wasn't included as the 16th case, or why they simply didn't say that the co-wife is the 16th case, that who is exempt. And then Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said, well, it's clear to me that this sage doesn't have a brain in his head. Very harsh answer. And it doesn't seem like it was such a crazy suggestion. So now we're going through, why Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi thought that the Mishnah is correctly formulated. And then we'll get back to why his answer was so harsh. And then, as we've seen, one of the issues that is at play here is that the cases which were listed in the Mishnah are the ones that everyone agrees on. All the sages agree that these 15 cases, the wife is disqualified from becoming a Yevama to the Yavam, right? The widow and the surviving brother, and they therefore also exempt the co-wives. But it turns out that may not be the case. I mean, some of these cases are the subject to a dispute. And we've seen that Rav Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, or I guess Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, each had some disagreement with the other sages on certain cases that are included or implied by the list. Okay. So we pick it up near the bottom of page 9. And Rav Yehuda explains that this is not true of all of the women listed in the Mishnah. Only from the case of his mother-in-law and onward until the end of the list is it possible for one sister to be a forbidden relation to one brother and the other sister not to be forbidden at all. And we looked at, we're not going to go into it all right now, but that strange case of 2 sisters and 4 brothers. Each of the sisters already had a daughter. 2 of the brothers married those daughters. 2 brothers married the sisters. 2 other brothers married those daughters. Then the 2 brothers died up here. And we have this strange case where the sisters and sister-in-laws have kind of varied relationships and yibum possibilities with the surviving brothers. So, however, in the first 6 cases, no, this option does not apply. And what is the reason for this? Since, for example, so here comes another hypothetical. In the case of one's daughter, although it is possible that one of the sisters is the daughter of one of the brothers, her mother is prohibited to all of the brothers as their brother's wife, and therefore she could not possibly have a daughter from another brother. And this case is possible only if one brother raped a woman who subsequently gave birth to his daughter. Now, rape is going to come up a lot. It's not that the sages are being dismissive to the emotional, trauma that surrounds rape, but just like when the Talmud discusses the 4 genders, 4 physical genders, right? Male, female, and then there's the hermaphrodite or androgynos, which is a person that has both male and female sexual organs, and the tumtum, whose sexual organs are covered and is of indeterminate gender, physically indeterminate gender. They didn't have, genetic testing, right? So they just had indeterminate gender. And those cases come up a lot, not because, hermaphrodites or tumtums, androgynos or tumtum come up so often in the real world, but rather because those cases present challenging questions of law. If that should ever come up, what would the ruling be? The reason that a rape keeps coming up in our discussion today is because a rape is a case where a man and a woman could have a child but not be married, right? Legally not be married, because if a man rapes a woman, the halacha of that, the way it was in the ancient world, is that she would have a choice whether she wanted to marry this man or not. She would have the choice. If she said, I will marry the rapist, then he had to marry her and could never divorce her. Right? So this is the Torah's way of a very strong disincentive in a harshly patriarchal society in the ancient world to really discourage rape, right? Because he would know that if he did that, he might have to support that woman for the rest of her life, and he would have no choice in the matter. But she was not forced to marry the rapist. So this is a case, and then this has repercussions in the next generation and outside of the man and the woman involved in that crime. Because, right, if they could have a child, but they were never married, right? If she chose not to marry this man, so she's still a free woman. She didn't consent to have sex outside of marriage, so she's not penalized for that. And then there was and the sages disagree, for example, on whether a young man, would be permitted to marry a woman who had been raped by his father, right? Whether there was a child of that Congress or not. So these kinds of questions have great halachic significance, and that's why it keeps coming up. So I just don't want you to think that when we keep mentioning the case of rape, it's like we're not, emotionally affected by that. It's just that it presents challenges to legal rulings, and that's why it keeps coming up. So, for example, in the case of one's daughter, so it is possible that one of the sisters, there's two sisters, one of the sisters is the daughter of one of the brothers, and her mother is prohibited to all the other brothers as their brother's wife, and therefore she could not possibly have a daughter from another brother. And this case is possible only if one brother raped a woman who subsequently gave birth to his daughter. Since the prohibition, and then that daughter, I guess, married one of his brothers. Since the prohibition with regard to a brother's wife applies only in the case of marriage, this same woman is not forbidden to a different brother, since there was no marriage and no sin by the woman. If another brother came and raped her as well, and she gave birth to his daughter too, and these two daughters later married two other brothers, so each of these sisters, who are sisters-in-law as well, right? Sisters can be sisters-in-law if two sisters marry two brothers. And so these two sisters, who are also sisters-in-law, are forbidden to one of the brothers, but permitted to the other, right? This unusual case that would lead to, and they created a whole case so that they would have that, where they would need to rule on that question. Is it possible that a sister could be prohibited to one brother and permitted to another? It would happen in these strange circumstances. Accordingly, in the case of rape, you can find this scenario, but in the case of marriage, you cannot. However, the Mishnah cannot be interpreted as referring to a case of this kind, as it deals with marriage and it does not deal with rape. So this is going back to the question of, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said that the 15 cases in our Mishnah are not subject to dispute. It's what everybody agrees on. And they say, well, wait a minute, everyone doesn't agree. And the answer would be, well, in these 15 cases, they're talking about relationships that were forged through marriage. The case of, paternal relationships forged through rape are not actually included in our Mishnah and are addressed elsewhere, according to this view. And Abaye explains differently, as he would include in this scenario even his daughter from the woman he raped. Why would he include this case? Since you can find this possibility, if you wish, it can be by rape, and if you wish, it can be by marriage, i.e., regardless of the details, the situation can occur, so it needs to be dealt with in a legal framework. However, the last case, that of a wife of a brother with whom he did not coexist, right? A brother that was born after the brother who died childless and left a widow. After that brother died, his parents had another son, so that, it's his brother, the one who died has a brother now, but they never coexisted, right? The new young baby didn't exist before his older brother died. So as we've seen, there's no yibum for a brother that did not coexist with his older brother. And he would not, and in that case, according to Abaye, he would not include. Why would he not include the brother who did not coexist? Since it is only according to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon that you find this potential scenario, as he permits a Yevama, the widow, to her Yavam, the surviving brother, in a case where he was born after she first entered yibum. It is therefore possible that one sister might be forbidden to one brother if he was born before his brother took her in yibum. Likewise, another sister might be forbidden to another brother for the same reason, although the first woman would be permitted to him, as in his lifetime she was never the wife of a brother with whom he did not coexist. But there was an in-between brother who was subject to yibum. And according to the opinion of the rabbis, however, you cannot find this scenario, and the Mishnah does not deal with disputes, but only with those cases accepted by all opinions. But Rav Safra explains that the possibility of one brother permitted only to one woman and another brother likewise permitted only to one woman exists even in the case of a wife of a brother with whom he did not coexist. And you can find this scenario in a case involving 6 brothers. And this is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Now we're on 10a. And your mnemonic to remember this strange case and how it might occur is as follows. Meis nolad v'yibam, meis nolad v'yibam, meaning died, was born, entered into yibum. Died, was born, entered into yibum. That's, remember, there's 6 brothers, but really it's 2 sets of died, was born, right? So a brother died and another one was born, and then someone entered into yibum. Died, another was born and entered into yibum. In other words, there were several brothers, and one, Reuven, died before another, Yissachar, was born, and another brother, Shimon, entered into yibum with the deceased's wife. And there was another brother, Levi, who died as well, and yet another brother, Zebulun, was born, and a 6th brother, Yehuda, who entered into yibum with the deceased's wife. Let's see if we can paint that picture. This isn't silliness, right? They're making these complex cases to arrive at a question that couldn't be asked otherwise, and then once they've painted the case, then they can ask the question, what is the law? Right? And if we can't understand the case, we won't understand the law. So let's see if we can get this picture. Right? So there's going to be 6 brothers. Reuven. So for basically, I'm using a circle for boys and a triangle for girls. Kind of helps me remember the triangle is sort of like a skirt. Okay. So there's going to be Reuven. Right? Reuven died before another, Yissachar, was born. Okay. And another brother, Shimon. And Shimon, this brother's not even born yet. Okay, so that's the way they're painting it, but it should probably make more sense to go like this. Shimon and Yissachar. Okay, so Reuven dies. He had a wife, and Shimon is going to marry that wife. Yissachar's not even born yet, and basically what's going to happen is that later Shimon is going to die, and then Yissachar is going to come up for yibum with the widow now twice, widow of Reuben and then widow of Shimon, and then there's another 3 brothers that have the same idea, right? And then there's going to be, like, when we get to the end of that, then what happens, right? So let's see if we can follow it. In other words, there were several brothers. Reuven died before Yissachar was born. And another brother, Shimon, entered into yibum with Reuven's widow. Then there's another set of 3 brothers. Levi died before Zebulun was born, and the 6th brother, Yehuda, entered into yibum with the deceased's wife. In this case, if Shimon and Yehuda was to die childless, so the second brother of each of, 2 brothers died, and their brother who was alive at the time married the widow, and then that second brother also died, right? So there's 4 brothers so far who've been married to 2 different women, and they all died childless. Now in each case there's a 3rd brother who was born after the first brother died, but during the lifetime of the second brother. So they're going to inherit, they're going to be up for yibum with a woman who had already, become a widow of 2 of their older brothers, one with whom they never coexisted and one with whom they did. So in this case, if Shimon and Yehuda were to die childless, their wives would come before the surviving brothers, Yissachar and Zebulun, for yibum. To one of them, Yissachar, the wife of the first brother Reuven is prohibited, and for the other brother Zebulun, the wife of the second brother Levi is likewise prohibited. And this is an example, prohibited because they never coexisted, I guess. And this is an example of the type of case analyzed in chapter 3. in which the ruling is that the woman who is forbidden to this brother is permitted to that one, and she who is forbidden to this one is permitted to that one. In any case, Rabbi Chia incorporates the opinion of Rabbi Shimon into this principle, as he maintains that this scenario can apply to each case stated in our Mishnah, and if so, the Mishnah evidently does deal with disputed legal rulings. How then can Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi claim that all the cases here in our Mishnah, the first Mishnah of the tractate, are unanimous, are undisputed? Rather, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rebbe, does not hold in accordance with these general statements applied by Rabbi Chia, and therefore he maintains that no issue subject to dispute was taught in the Mishnah. Rav Ada Karchina, who was sitting before Rav Kahana, said in the name of Rava, actually, one can explain that Rebbe does hold in accordance with these general statements laid out by Rabbi Chia. And this is what he said to Levi. In the case of his mother who had been raped by his father, you find this case with only one of the women. However, you cannot find it with two. In other words, the terms mentioned by Rabbi Chia above, she who is forbidden to this one is permitted to that one, and a sister who is a sister-in-law performs either chalitza or yibum, apply only partly to this complex case. We don't have to spell out the complex case. What we're trying to understand is it disputed or not? And the Gemara elaborates, if Yaakov, the father, raped two sisters who gave birth to two sons, this guy's a real piece of work. He raped two different women and had sons by them. And he had two other sons who married these raped sisters. Right now, that's only going to be permitted according to some opinions. Can a man marry a woman that his father raped? Right? You can't marry your mother, obviously. You can't marry your father's wife. Can you marry a woman that your father raped and then she chose not to marry your father? That is subject to a dispute. Some say yes, some say no. So if they did it, right? So if these sons of the rapist married women that their father raped, and then they died childless, the son who married this woman raped by the father, who had had a child by the father, which created other brothers, right? It's a mess. Okay, so if Yaakov the father raped two sisters who gave birth to two sons, and he had two other sons who married these raped sisters and then they died childless, in this scenario you find a case of her sister who is her sister-in-law, as there, a Yevama who comes before one of the brothers who is a forbidden relative and also a sister and a sister-in-law of another Yevama. However, you cannot find the principle of she who is forbidden to this one is permitted to that one. Although it is possible that one's brother's wife, who is one's mother, might come before one for yibum, just as he is forbidden to his mother, he is likewise forbidden to his mother's sister. And if the father raped two unrelated women, who gave birth to two sons, and then married two other sons of the same father, who subsequently died, you find the case of she who is forbidden to this one is permitted to that one, as each of the two raped women comes before one of the brothers for yibum, while she is forbidden to the other as his mother. However, you do not find the situation of her sister who is her sister-in-law. Therefore, the case of one's mother who was raped by one's father cannot be included in the list of our Mishnah, as the characteristics stated by Rabbi Chia do not apply to this case. We're not finding a case where both a woman could be permitted to one brother and prohibited to the other, and that a woman is both a sister of another woman and a sister-in-law of that other woman. Rav Ashi stated a different explanation. Actually, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rebbe, does not hold in accordance with these general statements of Rabbi Chia, and the Mishnah does deal with laws that are in dispute. According to his opinion, what is the meaning of the phrase when Rebbe said, it seems to me that he has no brain in his head, when somebody asked Rebbe, I guess Levi, so the sage Levi asked Rebbe, why can't we just include all the co-wives as the 16th case? right? And then Rebbe said, you have no brain in your head. So according to Rav Ashi, this is what Rebbe said to Levi. What is the reason that you were not precise in your interpretation of the Mishnah? As the Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who prohibited the case of a woman who was raped by one's father. Accordingly, the rulings of the Mishnah cannot be attributed to any opinion that is not in line with that of Rabbi Yehuda. What is the proof that this Mishnah is indeed in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda? As it teaches. Now we're learning why, according to Rebbe, this Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore, if you're asking a question that is outside of Rabbi Yehuda's opinions, then your question doesn't make sense. So as it teaches in the next Mishnah, Mishnah number 2 when we get to it, 6 women with whom relations are forbidden are more severe than these enumerated in the previous Mishnah, meaning the Mishnah we're doing now with the 15 women who exempt their co-wives. Why are these 6 women have more severe prohibitions? Because they may marry only others and can never be married to any of the brothers. And therefore their rival wives are permitted, right? There is no yibum even possible, and therefore they do not exempt their co-wives. The co-wives would be permitted because there's no hindrance to the co-wife, and the first wife is so prohibited that it's not like they're disqualified from yibum. It's like yibum never came up, and therefore the co-wives would be permitted. That's what we'll be learning about in Mishnah number 2. Why is this being brought up now, right? So as it teaches, we're learning how our Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. 6 women with whom relations are forbidden are more severe than these enumerated in Mishnah number 1 because they may marry only others and can never be married to the brothers, and therefore their co-wives are permitted. And these women include his mother, his father's wife, and his father's sister. And Rav Ashi infers, what is the meaning of his mother? If we say that this mother is married to his father, then this is the same case as his father's wife, which would mean that the Mishnah lists only 5 cases, not 6. Rather, is it not referring to a woman raped by his father? And it is taught in the Mishnah that the laws of yibum do not apply to them because they may marry only others, which indicates others, yes, this woman who was raped by his father, she may marry some other man. She's not married. She chose not to marry the rapist, so she's a single woman. She can marry whoever she wants. But she can never marry one of the sons of the man who raped her. So since each of the brothers are the sons of the same father, each one is prohibited from marrying the mother of one of the other brothers, as although she is not his mother, she is nevertheless a woman raped by his father, whom one may not marry. Who did you hear who holds in accordance with this conclusion, that a woman raped by one's father is prohibited to all his sons? It is Rabbi Yehuda who prohibits a woman raped by his father. Due to that reason, the case of a woman raped by one's father was not taught in the first Mishnah. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. The sages who disagree with him say, God forbid you have a case where, imagine that a boy and a girl like each other, they're getting to know each other and they're planning to get married, considering the possibility of getting married. This boy's father is just, a low-life degenerate criminal who rapes this potential daughter-in-law. Horrific. Okay, she chooses not to marry the rapist. Now, are we going to say that because his father raped this girl, that now the boy is prohibited from marrying her? No, the rabbis don't hold that way. Rabbi Yehuda does. Rabbi Yehuda says a boy can never marry a woman raped by his father. But the rabbis disagree with him. So is our Mishnah in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda or the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Yehuda? So Ravina said to Rav Ashi, even according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, you can find this possibility that a woman raped by a father comes before the son for yibum. How? What if one of the brothers transgressed and married a woman raped by his father? They transgressed Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Even though he prohibited, they married this girl. Is it not a valid marriage? No, it is a valid marriage because it was a decree of Rabbi Yehuda. It's not a Torah law. So what if one of the brothers transgressed and married a woman raped by his father? Even Rabbi Yehuda concedes that this is a violation of a regular prohibition that does not incur kares, and therefore the marriage is valid. Consequently, if this brother died childless, this woman would come before her son for yibum. The Gemara rejects this. You come before your son for yibum. Obviously, the son can't marry his mother, but his brother could, right? His brother, who had nothing to do with that woman that was raped by the father or stood to marry one of his brothers. So the Gemara rejects this proof. The Tana does not teach cases of what if, i.e. the Mishnah does not cite an example that could result only from a transgression. Rav Ashi said to Rav Kahana, even without a hypothetical, what if you can find an example of a woman raped by a father who is not forbidden to the son in marriage? How would you do that? So Yaakov, the father, raped his daughter-in-law. Okay, so he raped his son's wife, from whom he fathered a son. And the son, Reuven, the husband of the daughter-in-law, died without having any children of his own. And as Yaakov had two sons, the deceased Reuven and a son by Reuven's wife, whom Yaakov raped, Reuven's wife would then come before her son for yibum. And since she is forbidden, her rival wife is also forbidden, right? So let's just sketch that out for a second. Okay, so here's the horrible man, Yaakov. Okay? And he has a son, Reuven. Reuven has two wives, Penina and Chana. Chana, right? So C-H, Chana. Okay? So he has two wives. They are co-wives to each other. Now, this awful father rapes this daughter-in-law. Yaakov rapes Chana, and that produces a son. I think they're calling him Zerach, right? And they're calling him Zerach, okay? And then, so Reuven never had a child of his own. Only his father raped one of his wives and produced Zerach. Then Reuven dies, okay? So the problem is that Zerach is his brother, because Zerach is the son of Yaakov, and so is Reuven. So since they're brothers, paternal brothers, Zerach comes up for yibum. Now, obviously, he can't marry his mother, Chana, but is he? So does she exempt Penina as a co-wife? And that because she's prohibited to her son, therefore she should exempt the co-wife, right? Let me just get this right. How so? Yaakov the father raped his daughter-in-law from whom he fathered his son. Reuven, the husband of the daughter-in-law, died childless, and as Yaakov had two sons, the deceased Reuven and the son by Reuven's wife whom Yaakov had raped, Reuven's wife would then come before her son, right? Reuven's wife would come before her son for yibum. That's prohibited, and for levirate marriage. And since she is forbidden, her co-wife is also forbidden. Okay, that makes sense. Consequently, a case of this kind is possible without the yibum resulting from an illicit marriage. There was no illegal marriage. There was no brother who married a woman raped by his father. But you did come up with a case where there was no illegitimate marriage, and still you have this problem. So Rav Kahana said to Rav Ashi, the Mishnah deals with cases of legitimate brothers, whereas it does not deal with the cases of illegitimate brothers, right? When Yaakov raped his daughter-in-law, that produced a mamzer. The offspring of a man who raped his daughter-in-law is a mamzer. And cases of this kind are not discussed in the Mishnah. The Gemara comments, nevertheless, despite Rebbe's criticism, Levi established this additional possibility of a woman raped by one's father in his Mishnayos. As Levi taught in his Baraisa, with regard to the case of his mother, at times she exempts her co-wife, and at other times she does not exempt her co-wife. How so? If his mother was married to his father, and after his father's death, she illicitly married her son's paternal brother, who then died. This is a case of his mother who does not exempt her rival wife. And the reason is that her marriage to his brother does not take effect at all. It was an illicit marriage, as it was forbidden on pain of charis. Since this marriage never occurred, they married, they went through a marriage ceremony, but the marriage never took hold because it was a prohibited union. Since this marriage never occurred, only the other wife, the so-called co-wife, is considered a wife of the brother, and she may enter into levirate marriage, right? So we have the case where a man seemed to have two wives, then he died, and then, one wife is prohibited to the surviving brother, and the other is a co-wife who should be exempted by that. But in fact, the man didn't have, the brother who died didn't have two wives. One of the wives was a totally illicit marriage. Since there was really only one wife, and she's not prohibited to the surviving brother, the fact that there was a pseudo-wife who was acting as a wife, but in a marriage that was never permitted, that is not going to remove the remaining co-wife, the legal wife, from yibum or chalitza. So there, the co-wife is not exempted. She has to choose either yibum or chalitza. Now we're on 10b. If, however, his mother was a woman who was raped by his father and subsequently married his paternal brother, and the brother died, this is the case of his mother who exempts her co-wife. According to the opinion of the rabbis, this marriage is permitted because a man can marry a woman that his father raped. And even according to the opinion of Rebbe, the marriage is valid despite the transgression. Consequently, both the mother and her co-wife come before the son for yibum. And since the mother is a forbidden relation to him, her co-wife is exempt as well. And although the sages taught in the Mishna 15 women, we must add a 16th case, for example, the situation described above. Reish Lakish said to Rabbi Yochanan, according to the opinion of Levi, the one who Rebbe said has no brain in his head, according to the opinion of Levi, who said that the Mishnah teaches even cases of what if, which involve a transgression, meaning an illicit marriage, could become under consideration. Let the Mishnah also teach the case of one who performs chalitza with his Yevama and then went back and betrothed her. So interesting. So a man dies childless. The widow comes before the surviving brother for either yibum or chalitza. They choose chalitza. No, we don't want to marry each other. So they do chalitza. Now they're released from each other. They could go marry other people. But then they say, you know what? We chose chalitza after the trauma of losing, her husband, his brother. And as time passed, they realized they like each other and maybe they should marry. May they marry? She's prohibited to him as his brother's wife. She was only permitted because the guy died childless. And then they had either yibum or chalitza. They chose chalitza. Do we now restore the prohibition? You can never marry your brother's wife. Just like if they did have kids, then they never had this option that he could marry her because she's his brother's wife. Right? The one who died had a kid before he died. Then the brother would be prohibited to ever marry his brother's wife. So what about this? What if, according to the opinion of Levi, who said that the Mishnah teaches even cases of what if, which involve a transgression, let the Mishnah also teach the case of one who performs chalitza with his Yevama and went back and betrothed her, and then died childless. His betrothal is a transgression, right? He couldn't marry her after he performed chalitza with her. As after chalitza, the Yevama is permanently forbidden to him. As in this case, since she is forbidden to all the brothers due to the chalitza performed by the deceased Yavam, so she's now married two brothers who died, her rival wife is also forbidden. And this is an additional case of a woman who exempts her rival wife. So it seems like there should have been 16 cases, not 15. Rabbi Yochanan said to Reish Lakish, this example is not cited because the case does not include the possibility of a rival wife of a rival wife. All the other cases listed in the Mishnah involve both rival wives and rival wives of rival wives, right? So a man died, his brother stepped in, he could perform yibum or chalitza, chose chalitza, then decided to marry the woman anyway. and then died, and then he died childless, and now this woman who's been married to two brothers, and both of them died, comes before a third brother. Now, if the second brother had a wife already at the time that he decided to marry his Yevama, so now you enter new co-wife into the equation. There was also the first co-wife that was a possibility, and maybe he married both of them. So Rabbi Yochanan is saying to Reish Lakish that this case didn't belong in the list of our Mishna, the 15 women, because it didn't include the possibility of having a co-wife of a co-wife. So let's see if he explains that. All of the other cases listed in the Mishnah involve both co-wives and the co-wives of co-wives, right? That once he marries, that the second brother... When the Yavam marries his Yavama, he might already have a wife. And then if the second brother dies, now we go along to the third brother, and his potential Yavama picked up a new co-wife in the second marriage. Here, however, this is impossible, as the same prohibition applies equally to all of the brothers, and therefore none of them may marry her. And the Gemara asks, and let Rabbi Yochanan say a different answer to Reish Lakish, as he could simply have pointed out that marriage to a woman who performed chalitza is not a violation that incurs karas, neither for the one who performed the chalitza nor for his brothers if they marry her after he dies. Rather, it is an act for which they are liable for violating a regular prohibition. And those liable for violating a prohibition are obligated in chalitza and yibum. In these cases, the mitzvah of yibum still applies, and although the woman should be released by chalitza, she is not entirely exempt from yibum, and therefore her rival wife is not exempt either. The Gemara responds that Rabbi Yochanan is speaking in accordance with the statement of Reish Lakish, who's arguing with, as follows: according to my opinion, your question is groundless, as they are liable for violating a prohibition, and those liable for violating a prohibition are obligated in chalitza and yibum. However, according to your opinion, those brothers who marry a Yevama, who performed chalitza, are liable to receive karas, and therefore you must resolve the difficulty by saying that the Mishnah did not teach this case because it does not include the possibility of a rival wife of a rival wife, or co-wife of a co-wife. And the Gemara discusses the dispute alluded to in this paragraph. It was stated, with regard to one who performs chalitza with his Yevama and went back and betrothed her. Now we're seeing what exactly they disagreed with in this case. Reish Lakish said the brother who earlier performed chalitza is not liable to receive karas for returning to the Yevama who performed chalitza. She is no longer forbidden as a brother's wife, although she is forbidden by a regular prohibition. He's saying you're not allowed to marry a woman who came before you for yibum, and she performed chalitza with you, right? So you guys decided not to marry, you performed the chalitza ceremony. Then later, you decide, you know what, I will marry her. Now, that's definitely prohibited. But what is the nature of that prohibition? Is it prohibited because she's your brother's wife, and therefore that's punishable by karas? Or is it prohibited because the chalitza released her from that? She's not considered your brother's wife anymore, but what you violated is a rabbinic decree, and therefore you transgressed, but not with a karas-bearing penalty, and therefore if you then did decide to marry her, it's not, it's not good what you did, but it's not an illicit make-believe marriage, right? That's according to one view. And the brothers who did not actually perform the chalitza, the other brothers, right, who just stood by while she performed chalitza with one of their brothers, they are liable to receive karas for having relations with a chalutza. In their case, the woman retains her status as a forbidden brother's wife. They didn't perform chalitza with her, just one of their brothers did. So the other brothers cannot marry that woman under pain of karas. In their case, the woman retains her status as a forbidden brother's wife, even after the chalitza with their other brother. With regard to the rival wife of the chalutza, a woman who performed chalitza is a chalutza. Now she had a co-wife, although she too is released from the yibum bond. Since the act of chalitza itself was not performed with her, with the co-wife, both the brother who performed the chalitza and the other brothers are liable to receive kares for having relations with the co-wife, as she retains her forbidden status as a brother's wife. And Rabbi Yochanan said, neither he nor the other brothers are liable to receive kares, neither for the chalutza nor for having relations with her co-wife. And the Gemara explains, what is the rationale of Reish Lakish? The verse states, with regard to one who performs chalitza with his yevama, who does not build up his brother's house. When we're talking about somebody who chooses chalitza instead of yibum, about him, Deuteronomy 25:9 says, this is a man who does not build up his brother's house, which teaches that since he did not build his brother's house by entering into yibum, opting instead for chalitza, he shall never build it again. So they're saying it's a Torah prohibition that you cannot marry a woman with whom you perform chalitza. This statement is understood not only as a negative description of events, but also as a prohibition against marrying this woman at any point in the future. However, it is the man who performed the act of chalitza who stands liable to receive punishment for violating this prohibition of does not build up. If he changes his mind later and decides to marry the woman, his yevama, with whom he performed chalitza, he violated this prohibition. But that doesn't apply to his brothers. For him, the prohibition involving kares has been replaced by the regular prohibition of who does not build up his brother's house. It's a Torah prohibition, but it doesn't bear the penalty of kares. However, with regard to his brothers, where they stood before, they stand now. In other words, just as before the mitzvah of yibum marriage, just as before, the mitzvah of yibum applied to them, this woman was forbidden to them as a brother's wife. Once the obligation of yibum has been removed by the one of their brothers who performed chalitza with her, once the obligation of yibum has been removed, they remain bound by the same prohibition. They may never marry her because she's the brother's wife. And that would apply to her and her co-wife, of course. And consequently, she is forbidden to the brothers on pain of kares. And furthermore, only with regard to her, the chalutza, the woman who performed chalitza, does he stand liable for does not build up. But as for the rival wife who did not perform chalitza, where all the brothers stood before, they stand now. Just as before her co-wife performed chalitza, she was forbidden on pain of kares. The same applies after the chalitza, both for the man who performed chalitza and his brothers with respect to that co-wife. I'm almost done, so if you got questions or comments, get them in. And Rabbi Yochanan claims, is there anything of this kind in law? After all, at the outset, before the chalitza, if this brother wanted, he could perform chalitza, and if that brother wanted, he could perform chalitza, and if he wanted, he could perform chalitza with this woman, and if he wanted, he could perform chalitza with that woman. All the deceased brothers' wives were included in the yibum obligation, or chalitza, and therefore the prohibition prescribing a brother's wife was negated for all of them at that time. And now, after the chalitza, they stand to incur kares for having relations with her? How can the prohibition prescribing a brother's wife return after it was nullified by the death of the childless brother? Rather, he who performs chalitza performs the agency for the other brothers, and therefore he also releases her from yibum bond of his brothers, and similarly she who performs chalitza performs the agency for her co-wife, as the chalitza of one wife serves to release the other one as well. Consequently, it is as though all of the brothers released all of the wives, and there is no longer any prohibition that incurs kares. The last thing I'll read to you is where the law ended up on this question. The prohibition prescribing a chalutza to the man who performed chalitza and to his brothers. If a yavam, the surviving brother, performs chalitza with his yevama, the widow, she and her co-wives are forbidden to him and the other brothers. However, this prohibition does not incur kares, but is a regular prohibition. And this ruling is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, as the law follows his opinion against that of Reish Lakish. According to the Rambam, the prohibition is a decree of the sages, and that is how he interprets the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. However, others maintain that according to Rabbi Yochanan, a marriage between one of the brothers and one of these women constitutes the violation of a prohibition. All right, that's where we leave off today. Let us check questions or comments. PK, if the man raped the woman, then he... Oh, wait a minute. First, let me see, Nina. Okay, so I asked at the beginning how we feel about doing the whole daf every day or just doing highlights from the daf. Some opinions on that. Aoife, I am appreciating doing the whole daf. Lynn, I am reading the whole page. I appreciate the whole daf, but it is a lot of work for all of AT, and I am happy with the other format too. Don't burn out and feel free to mix it up as needed. Lindsay says, prefer the whole page, but would prefer you do what is best for you and can catch up where needed. Okay, so thank you everybody for the flexibility. And, definitely before we make a choice in this regard, other people can weigh in also. Let me know how you feel on whether we should keep doing the whole page or just highlights from the page. Renee, I am spending more time learning Daf Yomi in order to keep up properly with the class here than I did when I started, and life is so much the sweeter. I vote for the whole Daf. And Bella, please keep the same format. You are doing a wonderful job. Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. And PK, the age would prohibit childbirth on the woman left to marry the newly born son. Wouldn't that be right? By the time the baby grows up, the woman would be too old. I'm not sure I would agree with that. Just because the way things were happening in the ancient world, women could and did probably get married when they were 15, maybe even 14. And so it could happen, it certainly could happen. And that was the case in the situation with Judah and Tamar, right? I mean, the young son who was, I guess, coexisted with his brothers, but was still very young, like a baby boy, and they were waiting for him to grow up. So a woman, could have lost a man and then come up for remarriage with a baby that was born later, 14, 15 years later. He's sexually mature enough. I mean, it's crazy to the modern mind to think of people getting married at that age, but it's possible. Right? It's possible. And so much of what we're discussing in these cases is not ever likely to happen in the real world. But if it did, what would be the law? We need to understand that. And in order to understand what would be the law, we have to deepen our understanding of the law. Right? And what is the law? God's will for us. That's why it's so important to investigate. All right. That's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow night. Now the clocks changed last week, so Motzi Shabbos. Candle lighting here in LA is 6:46. Shabbos is ending, around 8. So we're going to get on the air as quickly as I can after Shabbos ends, but it always takes a little time. So it's probably going to be, 8:30 Pacific time, and then just gets later and later as we get into the summer. But okay. We do what we can. So you should all be blessed with a really, really beautiful, restful, rejuvenating, sweet Shabbos. All the best. Good Shabbos.